back to an episode of Willow Branch Podcast. We are super excited to be back on here with you all. It is a beautiful day outside, and we have a beautiful view from where we are currently sitting.
Yes, beautiful big windows, and we had little birdies land and say hi to us, and it's a gorgeous day.
So we're talking about the subject of empathy today, and this was inspired from something that recently happened in the world.
Yes.
Which a lot of our podcasts and stuff are going to have some kind of a catalyst as to why we're talking about them, or as to why we're bringing up the subject.
Things that are happening in today's world that we see, maybe there's a mindset that you're seeing in politics in the political world, or you see something in the social world, and you kind of get the impression that the majority feels that way, or there's an adopted understanding to something, and maybe it just feels gross, and you're questioning, why did this happen? How did this happen? How did this bleed into the entire society to where it's just become a part of the norm?
So we're going to be here combating some of that energy that's being thrown out there, but also adding to some of the positive vibes that you see out there in the world as well.
Exactly.
And with me to do that today, of course, I'm Junia, and I have
Mary
and
Emily.
And
dun, dun, dun.
If you guys are not familiar, we are the board members, minus Ashley. Ashley is a board member too for It Is Well Spiritual Community /Center.
Yes.
It's
not a slashing center. Just trying to clarify that. I heard you say slash, and I'm like, okay, well,
not a slashing.
Let's clarify. We're an uplifting, healing community.
So, but anywho, we wanted to talk about this subject with you guys today because I feel like I want to almost start it off by saying we hear a lot about empaths in the world, or empathic people, especially if you're a part of the spiritual community or the spirituality community. You'll hear the word empath a lot.
Right.
And I know somebody has a definition of what empathy is.
I do.
Could you share that with us?
I do. Empathy, in layman's terms, is the ability to understand and share the feelings of others. That's in layman's terms, if you look it up in the dictionary. But there's a lot of ways to break it down, too. I also have a breakdown, if you're interested in that. Empathy is also, when you break that down, is seeing the eyes with the eyes of others. Mm-hmm. So if you're being sympathetic, that is like, oh, I'm sorry for you. But empathy is actually taking it on and connecting with the experience of that other person or persons, listening with the ears of others, feeling with the heart of others. So that kind of taps into what that other person or persons are actually experiencing.
That's a part of my notes too. It's
kind
of funny.
It just had a little snippet on my phone to help me remember. But the first thing popped in my head when we were talking about empathy was a quote by Brene Brown, of course.
Right, Brene Brown's great.
I love
She's
her.
Awesome.
But she said that empathy drives connection, sympathy drives disconnection, and it is that difference of I feel with you versus I feel for you.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
Ooh,
that is so
interesting.
Good. I feel for you, or I feel with you.
Yeah, because one's an embrace and the other one is like it's distancing.
Yeah, it's kind of like, oh, poor you.
Oh, you poor little thing.
I mean, and I'm not.
Sympathy's not a bad thing.
We're not poo-pooing sympathy, because what happens when somebody loses a loved one or something? You send them, our deepest sympathies, for your loss, or we send sympathy to someone like that. So that in that aspect is understandable, but empathy to me is a different scenario.
Yeah, absolutely, it is. So as a part of that, now that we understand what empathy is a little bit more, we hear a lot of times empathy as a negative, especially in the spirituality community. Although it seems like people use it as a way of saying, like, this is my power, to be empathic is a power that I have, you hear a lot of the negative connotations that go along with that. So you'll hear people say things like, I'm empathic, I can't be in a big crowd of people. I'm empathic, I struggle with being near others for long periods of time, those kinds of things. So we've almost started correlating it with more of these negative ideas. And I want to get back to, in this conversation today, why empathy is a strength, why it is the power.
Honestly, the biggest negative I hear about empathy is that it's a weakness.
I was thinking,
You know, in today's society, and I'm not bashing any particular group or not, but usually it is coming from a man's viewpoint, especially in politics or in the higher realms of our society, you know, billionaires or whatever, saying that if you are empathetic or you show empathy, then you are showing weakness.
Well, and that just, I think that correlates into particularly our society as a whole too, because it reminds me of something I was watching the other day, and he wasn't specifically talking about empathy, but he was talking about how men interact with men. And it's not just men though. I see it's your energy, and I see so many people so aggressive all the time when there's really no space for it or no need for it.
Right.
But he was talking about, you know, as a man, from man to man, especially here in the US, it's, you know, if you say something to one of your bros, you know, you better be ready to fight, because that is very much what boys and men are taught. And growing up in the inner city in Columbus, women were taught that too.
Right.
If you say something that, even if you're saying it out of love, a lot of the time it was taken as disrespect. And if you were going to open your mouth, you better be ready to back it up. And he was like, you know, what is the difference between, you know, say my friend uses a derogatory word that I don't like, and I say something to them. A lot of the time the reaction nowadays is, oh, don't say that, and usually there's some, what's the word I'm looking for? Not so nice words that follow that. It's like, you know, stop being or that's some stuff, that kind of stuff. Right. And he was like, you know, but instead of being so negative and deflecting all the time, he was like, you still cannot control how the other person responds, but you need to make it about love and embracing that person, instead of saying, you know, don't say that because that's horrible or something like that. The difference would be coming to somebody and be like, hey dude, you know, I love you, I don't like that you use that word. You know, I think you're better than that. You deserve to treat yourself better than that. I'm letting you know because I know you're better than that, and I love you, and I don't want you, you know, degrading yourself. Or he said a lot more beautifully than that, but just the aspect of it. And as a mom of a 12-year-old boy, and I already feel like I think and try to react like that most times, just being very conscious and trying to be uplifting and coming from a positive place. But I see it, especially in the more masculine areas of our society, where it's sad, it sucks, and people think that, you know, putting on this mentality of aggressiveness or, you know, immediately ready or prepared to fight, that's a strength. It's not.
No.
Strength would be not being defensive, not being reactive, because anybody can immediately shut off emotions and be reactive or defensive.
And there it is.
It takes a whole lot of strength to be vulnerable and not go into defense mode.
That's exactly what I was going to say. From my own personal experience, I grew up with a dad who I learned a lot of masculine energy from that, because from the get-go he hated the fact that I was a girl, and he had always wanted a boy. So right out the gate, I was told to suck it up, you know. So that energy is what I grew up with, and I'm here to tell you from my own personal life and my experience and journey that I'm on, that empathy is a superpower. Mm-hmm. If you are able to be at peace and stand in your own mind, body, and soul, and say that I am capable not only of taking care of myself, but I am capable of showing other people that I care for them as well. That is a huge superpower. You can stand in your own strength. You stand as a beautiful beacon of light, and you reach out to your community, whomever and whatever, male, female, it doesn't matter. The important thing is your energy and the love that you give, and not being afraid to show love, because what is the one thing that this world needs more than anything else? And that is love. We got plenty of all the other stuff.
We do.
Oh, yeah.
So empathy is just a part of that. Empathy is a beautiful, beautiful branch, olive branch, if you will, of love, of unconditional love. Yeah, you're reaching that out to your fellow man and saying, I am going to show you empathy because I want you to know that someone cares for you, cares for your situation. Nobody else will do it? Okay, no problem. I'm here.
Right.
I love you.
Right.
What can I do for you? How can I help you? How can I make the situation better for you? You know?
How can I support you?
How can I support you?
Yeah. So I want to go back a little bit to Emily's topic of the masculine aspect of, you know, it being a weakness, because I've been reading this really, really good book. It's called The Courage to Be Disliked, and in it talks about the psychology of Dr. Alfred Adler, who founded the concept of individual psychology. And individual psychology states, and I'm going to try to read my notes here because they're a little messy, but that human thought and behavior are individual man's striving for power due to feeling inferior.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
I mean, that hit the nail on the head.
That's exactly
right. Right.
It's all about defense deflection, and it's fear of judgment. It's
Yes.
fear of
Yeah.
being dismissed or
Yeah, because we don't want
Empathy.
anybody to think that we're inferior. Or
Right,
anything. We don't want anybody to
exactly.
think that we can't handle it. We got this.
It's man feeling like, and we say man, right? Women do this too, we know this. But it's man feeling like they have to strive to feel superior to others. And empathy, for whatever reason, makes them feel like they are inferior.
Because they're opening up their feelings. Because empathy requires you to feel.
Exactly.
But the power aspect of things, like, just kind of blew my mind, because I was just thinking about all of these people in power who are in these positions, who are basically stating that something like empathy, compassion, love, kindness, those things are weaknesses, when in all reality they're just showing themselves. They are literally, we're seeing their own wounds.
You are an actual small human man.
Yes.
I don't care what your name is. I don't care who you are.
Right.
You are a small man who is human.
Right. As are we all.
Exactly.
Right.
And if you think about it too, if you really dig deep down into it, like,
That happens.
so
That never happens.
all these people that are like that, defensive, deflective, feel inferior, they think that they put themselves on this pedestal, but it comes from the constant validation of others. And when you really get down to the nitty gritty, these people more than likely were in a situation that they weren't allowed to have feelings, or they were made to feel that their feelings aren't valued, aren't important. You can't be empathetic if you can't, like, you can't understand somebody else's feelings or feel somebody else's feelings if you've never even felt your own.
Right, exactly.
And
True.
we see that a lot, especially, like we said, it's across all ages, sexes, genders, all
Right.
that stuff. It happens to everybody. Nobody is,
Nobody's above it.
right,
I mean,
exactly.
that's why I say it's a superpower.
Right. But you know, somebody that doesn't know their own values or doesn't have values are not going to find value in anything else. Somebody that
True.
has been taught their whole life not to feel feelings, or that feelings are a bad thing, there's no way that they can understand where you're coming from or what you're going through, because they don't even understand themselves.
Right, exactly.
And it's about breaking those barriers and trying to open eyes and make people realize that, like, emotions are not a bad thing.
Right.
Processing what you're going through is not a bad thing. Deflecting and being defensive and being judgmental of others or belittling, degrading, all that stuff of others, that's not okay. That's not right. You wouldn't want it done to you. Why are you doing it to somebody else? And not only that, you're driving your own issues further by staying in that negative mindset.
Right.
If you are so clung to that, how will you ever grow? How can you expect others to love you unconditionally? And that's the other thing too, though, is when you see in situations like that, a lot of people can't even comprehend the real basis of love, because to them everything has always been conditional. So everything coming to them or going from them is conditional.
Conditional, competitive.
I
Yes.
just had that conversation last night, that true love in its truest form is not love. True love. That true love in its purest form is never conditional.
Mm-hmm.
And if you are in a situation or have had an experience where love has been given to you but on a conditional basis, that is not true love.
Right.
True love is unconditional. Think about a dog.
Yeah.
That is one of my, and I know anybody that knows me knows how I feel about dogs. But that's part of the reason, is because when you have a relationship with a dog, no matter what you've ever done to that dog, when you walk in the door, what does that dog do? It looks like it is the best day ever when it's greeting you and you're coming home. And that's just a very small example. But if you look at time and time and time again of how that dog treats you, that is one of the most beautiful forms of unconditional love that I've ever seen in my life.
And I feel like, honestly, they are innately empathic.
Yes, they are.
And I feel like they are also kind of present here to remind us
Aren't
of
they here to
unconditional
teach us a
love.
lesson? Exactly. Yeah. I feel like, God, universe, whoever you align with is like, and we're just going to place these beautiful angels right here to show you this is an example of unconditional love.
Right.
And support. I know that when I have broken down and just lost it, which has been several times since I lost my daughter, for example, if there was a dog around, they were up in my lap. Yep. They came to me. And I'm telling you what, maybe they don't speak English the way we speak English, but they sure do connect with you energetically.
That's just it too, though. That's a whole another example of sometimes you just need somebody to be there. Sometimes there's no words to be said.
There it is. I was going to say that. We don't have to, we're not saying on here on this podcast talking about this subject of empathy, we are not saying in any terms that you are required to understand completely what that other person is going through. Maybe it is a situation where there's no way I could understand what that person's going through. But just creating a space of love and acceptance for that person. Maybe that's all that's needed.
Right. Well, I'm looking here in front of us. So we have these beautiful handouts that Mom shared with us. Or as you guys know her as Mary, shared with us. It's my mom.
Mary, aka whatever.
She's the mama of It Is Well Spiritual Center.
In my phone, it's Mama Mary.
I love it.
Nice, I didn't know that. It is.
Well, everybody kind of calls you mama around here. So we have, the paper says Elements of Empathy Wheel. And I love this because what you're talking about is present here within this empathy wheel. And if you would walk us through it, I think it's very interesting because although we see different aspects here that are like, oh, we could, connect verbally with this person, it's not necessary to hit these stages and also like talk to that person as if you know exactly what's going on. Empathy doesn't have to be a vocal thing, like we said.
You made me think of my time in the Christian church when I was in different positions of leadership, and it made me think about that, where I felt like as a leader, I was required to come up with the right words to say all the time, all the time. And I remember sometimes of feeling like helpless or powerless because I couldn't think of the right words to say. And that's not the point. That's not the point of creating space and being there for that other person.
Right.
The aspects of that, what Junia was talking about, is being self-aware. Just having a moment where you're aware of how you're feeling in the situation and what is it that you want to support this other person with. So then you go from being aware of yourself, becoming aware of your emotional state and others, and you pay attention. Communication clues, it talks about, there's a time to speak and there's a time to listen.
Right.
There's a time to hold somebody's hand, and then maybe there's a time to offer a resource, things like that. So paying attention to the communication cues, that's important. Tuning into that other person, they call it peer awareness. So you go from self-awareness and then you go to peer awareness. So as I'm having a conversation with this person who needs that empathy, needs that compassion, needs that love from someone, maybe I just kind of actually just stop everything I'm doing, because we all have that voice going on in our heads, right? Mm-hmm. When I get home, I got to do the laundry, go to the grocery store, you got things going on all the time. So maybe you just stop for a minute and you actually listen to that other person, and in so doing, you make an effort to understand them. I'm not saying you're going to understand everything, right, but you put the effort forth.
Right.
But it's interesting because we were talking about this earlier when it comes to, you might not understand somebody's grief, but you could still be present for them, kind of a thing.
Yes.
We all understand the feeling of grief.
Yeah.
We all understand the feeling of sadness, of heartbreak, loss in general. So being empathetic doesn't mean that I've experienced exactly what you have experienced. Sometimes it means I've experienced my own version of this feeling. And because of that, I'm able to sit here and be present for you. And I love this because the paper says actively listen.
Yeah.
And I think that part of the reason why we struggle with empathy sometimes is because we forget to be active.
It's
listeners.
an action. It is an action. Yeah. You're right.
I see it all the time, especially between families and couples when it comes to conflict resolution. You're listening to react. A lot of the time, you're listening to defend yourself. You're not actually sitting back and being like, oh my God, I hear you. Like, I hear what the problem is. I hear how you're feeling. And that is one thing, especially as a society, that we see all kinds of issues with. Everybody is listening to defend themselves. They're listening to hear because and maybe the person it depends on how consciously aware and intellectually, emotionally intelligent you are. But when you have somebody coming to you and confiding in you, hey, you did this, you said that, this action hurt me, you didn't do this and it made me feel like you didn't value me, or like you didn't care, or like everything's on me. When you hear that, and somebody is coming to you and expressing their feelings, they're telling you, I feel alone, or I feel hurt, I feel like you don't care, instead of reacting and like, well, I did this and I did that and the third and da 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 da. It's not a competition, and that's so much just like we were talking about earlier. Everything is a competition. No, you genuinely care about that person if you do, and they're coming to you and telling you those things. Right. Say, I hear you.
Exactly.
Think when you hear, like for me, if somebody I cared about came and told me that 10 years ago, I probably would have been on the defense.
Right.
I would have.
Right.
That's me. That's old Mary. I did that.
Yeah.
I did that.
I still have moments of that.
Oh, everybody.
You're
we all have our
moments. I'm like
moments.
forming my response as they're talking, and I'm like,
right.
Why?
But
Why?
Exactly. But I feel now, like if somebody were to come say that to me, that would be my reaction at all. My first reaction would be, oh my gosh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to make you feel that way. And then let's sit down and talk about it. What's the problems? What do you need help with? Where can I come in? How can we balance this? This is what my schedule or my day, this is how full or not full I am. Like, what do you need from me? And this is what I have to offer. How can we make these two things coincide?
Well, see, with conflict resolution, like you said, a lot of times we look at it as a competition.
Yeah.
Me against you. One of the big things that I've been trying to kind of rewire in my own marriage is, instead of me against you, how can I be empathic toward my partner and recognize that it's us against the problem or the issue. So there is no actual tension between the two of us. It's against, that's it.
Yeah,
that's it.
So one thing that's been frustrating for me is I feel like majority of my relationship, majority of me as a person, especially in relationships, I have always had that it's you and me against the world mentality.
Yeah.
Just always have. But being with somebody that doesn't, it's very aggravating because he doesn't quite get that concept. So then if some days it feels like you're talking to a wall, it's like I'm trying to get you to understand. I'm not attacking you. I'm not trying to hurt you. I'm saying this because I love you, but I'm hurting. And we're getting better about that. But it is like, and I see that in so many, and I hate to just like go on about men, but it is very much a problem in our society. There are a lot of women that are that way too, but so much of it breaks down to toxic masculinity. Whether you're a man or a woman, either can carry toxic masculinity.
Yes, I carried it for years.
I did
if you're
too.
constantly in that competitive mindset, you're in that toxic masculinity energy, even if you are a woman. It doesn't matter.
No. I was for the beginning of my adulthood, just because I was lucky enough that I had some really amazing men in my life through my grandfather and my uncles. But my dad, still to this day, like it just kind of hit me in the last 6 months because I had a lot of good father figures, but I never had a dad. And I never had one person that was always consistent. My grandfather a little bit, but he passed when I was 8 years old.
Yeah.
So like it kind of hit me the other day, like, wow, I don't think I have any trauma from it. At least not now. But I'm 32 years old. I've never known what it's like to actually have a dad. Like, I have no idea. Mm-hmm. And because of all the chaos and all the back and forth and all the things I went through as a kid, like, I was taught to be very independent, especially as a woman, and not to rely on anybody. But I had a really good view of what a good man looked like to me, or what I thought a healthy relationship was. And I still think that I grew up seeing some great relationships. I just never was actively a part of a lot of that. Not enough to consistently, I feel like, drive home what was healthy and what wasn't, because of all the toxicity and craziness that I saw when I did live with my parents. So yeah, I carried a lot of toxic masculinity for the beginning of my adulthood, because I always felt like I had to defend myself.
Right.
And in addition to that, when I was a teenager, there was a lot of stuff I got blamed for that I had nothing to do with me. I also, I would have a lot of times people lie and say that I did things that never happened, or lie and make accusations of things and a lot of it was to cover other issues. It was to deflect. It was to put it on me because I was a kid and I couldn't get in trouble. And
you were the scapegoat.
Literally. I was the scapegoat constantly, especially as a teenager.
I'm sorry.
It was always, it bothered me when I was younger. And now I don't even really think about it, which is kind of nice. But it's just leading back to that. What was I saying? Empathy.
Yeah. We were talking about the toxic masculinity aspect of competition and how we're in that zone. And the reason why we get in that zone a lot of times is because we don't actively listen. So we don't actually tune in.
We're more
to others.
concerned with protecting ourselves.
Yeah.
And that's the initial, knee-jerk reaction.
Yeah.
So it's a knee-jerk reaction only because it's like learned behavior. We had to take that on because we felt like if we didn't protect ourselves, who was?
Right.
It's like a survival instinct or a
Exactly.
survivalist
Exactly.
kind of mindset. So what you were surrounded by was more of that survivalist energy and that competitive energy instead of empathy.
I was constantly in survival mode. Even when the
That's
only
exhausting.
breaking, oh my gosh.
That's
the only
exhausting.
point that I got out of survival mode, I think, was when my aunt and uncle got custody of me.
Yeah.
And for a brief moment in time, I was out of that. But my whole, even, so my grandmother's, especially as a kid and a teenager, was home to me. I lived with her majority of my life. But because she didn't have custody of me, at any given moment, and it happened, I would get ripped out of her house with no notice.
I
And-
can sympathize with that. I empathize with you on that because that was a part of my childhood.
Yeah.
My mom and dad. My mom would escape my dad because he would become violent, or the sheriff would come, or was it in an instance where he was chasing us with a gun or a knife or whatever, and our only refuge was my mom and I would run up to her parents and we would stay in their house for a while. I think we stayed at my grandparents' house. I know it feels like a different person, different life.
I know, yeah.
I think we actually lived with my grandparents 6 or 7 times total. And I always felt like that was home
Mm-hmm.
because my grandparents, they were it for me. They were it for me. I learned more from them than I did anybody else. And there's somebody coming in. I don't know if she needed something. This lady was coming to the door. Anyways, Grandpa would take me outside and I'd go for walks with him, and he would teach me about the trees and about the garden and just about life. I learned so much from that little man, but that was the life. And I even got enrolled in school a couple times in their neighborhood. I went to the Catholic church up the road because they were all Catholic. We were all Catholic at the time, and so I was a part of 2 different Catholic schools in those different stints. But I understand what you're saying, because without warning, I would get ripped out of that secure, safe home environment, and Mom couldn't stand to be without a man. I mean, that was something that was a huge insecurity of hers. She didn't think she could survive without a man.
Yeah.
So whatever he did, he would talk her into it.
Yep.
And back we went with Dad, and back we would go. It was like out of the frying pan, back into the fire, kind of a thing. Mm-hmm. And it would be without warning. And in a kid's world, it turns your world upside down, and you're immediately back into fight or flight, because at any given moment, you didn't know what was going to happen.
Nope.
I didn't know if he was going to go off because I ate the wrong cereal, or I didn't want to watch the movie with him.
Yeah.
Or it could be any given number of things. So I do empathize with that feeling that you had of being ripped out at any given moment. And I'm sorry that you have experienced that.
I'm sorry.
I love you.
I love you too. Very much.
Beautiful display of empathy. You guys just jumped to the third part here.
Well, no, you guys actually covered the next 2. You guys did. You covered it before I even came back in. But I mean, finishing that wheel, if you're going to talk about that elements of the empathy wheel, is to reach out and show compassion.
So we went to relate, connect, and then reach out.
Yes, you did.
Yes.
Yes, you did. So it's observe, tune in, relate, connect. That's the sign language for connect. And then reach out. So you reach out and respond appropriately to a person through acts of compassion. So how can I support you? I'm going to somehow display my compassion towards you to let you know that somebody feels what you're going through, And what do we do? What is the goal of that? The goal is to lift up that other person. What is it? To help them to heal. To help them, we've had countless numbers of parables and teachings and stories throughout our lives of where, if somebody's left on the side of the road, what do? You stop, you go over and you help to lift them up and get them back on their feet. So this, in essence, is a similar act, correct?
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's energetically, emotionally, aligning yourself with that person in that space and in that moment.
Body, mind, soul.
Giving them the presence that they need for healing to take place, for their own personal healing to take place. So that right there within itself talks about why empathy is a superpower.
Yes.
Is because it helps
I'm going to
others.
get that on a t-shirt. Empathy is my superpower.
I love it.
We need to get this.
Honestly,
Up and away. Oh, no, that's
Yes.
that's what
different podcast. Different
Wrong podcast.
Check out Krypton Report
Yeah,
for all your
Krypton
Superman
Report
needs.
podcast. That was a little shameless plug.
I love it.
We support superheroes on this podcast.
Yes, because all of us are.
That's right.
Yes.
That's right.
So I love that though, because it provides space for others around us to heal. That's what empathy does, or being empathic toward other people does. And then we have, I wanted to share this part too, like another way of looking at it from a bigger perspective is
Good.
that it helps to foster social interest. It helps us to build trust,
Yes.
to contribute positively to our society.
Yes.
So on a bigger scale,
That's what I was gonna
how
say.
does empathy impact the larger
How
scale?
do
We've
we-
seen it on the individual basis here. So when we think about that ripple effect
Right.
of empathy, how does it ripple out?
How do we affect the greater world? How do we affect the world greater than just us or our circle?
So if we looked at, for instance, if we have a leader in our society who is an empathic leader, what does the world around that leader look like?
Oh my gosh. I can imagine.
I have a quote too.
Everybody would have food and housing, and we went.
We already know.
Yeah.
We already know that we have the resources.
Right.
But
Well,
it
that's
is
just
going from a closed fist to an open fist mindset.
Right.
Open
And
hands.
saying that I trust in what we have on this planet Earth is enough to take care of everyone. And just removing those mental borders.
Yes.
I started to say borders, but mentally.
Right.
If they're there mentally, because mentally, that changes everything
Well,
we do.
the
Right?
mental border or boundary that's here with society is the one that says someone is superior, someone is inferior.
Mhm.
Empathy allows us to see that we are all the same.
Empathy allows us to see that we are one and the same, but we're all human. We
Right.
all need the same resources. We all eat and sleep and breathe because we're all the same when it comes down to it. And why are we in competition of one another? When I can take my loaf of bread and break it off into 10 pieces and 10 people can eat instead of one person.
And then
Exactly.
what does that take from you? And that's the thing that we
Nothing.
have right now in society is this whole feeling of, well, if I give my piece of bread to somebody else, then, am I going to have enough?
Right.
Is that going to be enough to feed me and my family? And the truth of the matter is the scarcity is a mindset. It is not a reality.
It is a mindset. You made me think of there's a children's story called Stone Soup. I don't know if you've ever read it.
Long time ago.
I was
The mindset basically is you hoard what you have because if you give it away, you won't have. But what actually happens in the story is that someone has a clever way of showing this little village that when you give what little you have, you find out that everyone that contributes what little that they have, next thing you know, you have this abundance that everyone is benefiting from. So if I give my piece of bread and I divide it up into 10 pieces, how do I know that this other person over here doesn't have a resource to add to that?
Right.
So you're never without. For me, when I look at that, when I think about that story, and I've divvied that up and given it to 10 people, I just gained something, because I gained a way to connect with those 10 people. I gained an open door where that person's going to look at me and say, they gave me part of their bread.
Right.
And whatever they choose to do with that is up to them. But I opened that door.
Right.
I created that connection. There is now this beautiful gold energetic line that connects me to that person. And that could cause healing. That could cause communication. That can cause uplifting. And that's the start of community, right?
We've been actually getting validation of that recently in certain real world aspects. Like, I didn't know, could you pull up, we had a comment from Isaac on our Discord. So for those of you who don't know, we have a community Discord. So if there's at any point in time that you would like to actually communicate with people who might be like-minded, if you're listening to this podcast, especially 40 minutes into it, you might be like-minded. So checking out the podcast is great, but if you want to dive in further, check out our community Discord, which is It Is Well spiritual Discord. So on there,
Junia put this morning, question for today: how could empathy be seen as a strength? We hear a lot about the struggles of someone who considers themselves empathic, but how does it make us society stronger? And a beautiful young man from who taps into the community, social media, and I'm just highlighting the fact that he is a man and he is opening himself up to be transparent about the subject of empathy. This is his answer to that question. It is always a subject I have struggled with because it's not something I experienced much of my life. But I've come to learn most from the times that I've been shown empathy is that I'm not alone. Others have survived storms and I can survive too. I thought that was a beautiful, beautiful comment.
So empathy provides a sense of belonging for us.
You say belonging and immediately Brene Brown pops in my head. I love that woman. But no, it is. It's, what exactly was it she said? She was talking about the sense of belonging to yourself versus fitting in. And I think that's a huge part of what goes into this too, is everybody's always got on that fake face. Mm-hmm. Everybody feels like they have to impress, they have to meet some status quo, or they can't be looked at in a certain light. And when you're always trying to portray something and you don't tap into your real self, how could you tap into somebody else? You can't be empathetic when you can't even be real. And I think I was already very much in love with myself before I heard that quote from her. I had done a lot of work and done a lot of healing, but when she said, I don't remember exactly what she said word for word, but basically, I don't want to fit in. I want to belong, because when I belong and I belong to myself, I fit in everywhere I go.
That's it.
There it is.
It's back to that self-awareness aspect. If we look at the wheel of empathy, the self-awareness happens first before you can observe somebody else.
Did you notice that? That's step number one. That's step number one.
Yeah, totally.
So like I had said towards the beginning, it was a realization for me. It's not just lip service that when I say something like that, it's actually something that I am living, that I have lived and I am living.
It comes from knowing yourself.
It comes from learning who you are, accepting who you are, loving who you are, because I have had in recent months moments where I've had to choose myself. Mm-hmm. And in so doing, there have been moments of feeling very alone. I'm not going to lie.
Right.
I have felt very alone. But it's also been so healing and empowering to the point where I know, oh my God, if I accept myself and I heal my home, which is here, how much more love, within me, how much more love am I able to turn around and give to other people?
Right. Yeah.
That's so important, because that's what's going to heal. And you were talking about in the greater world and things, and I have kind of a quote where it talks about having empathy in leadership.
Go for it.
In leadership, it's a cornerstone that can foster a positive organizational culture. And it requires strength and discipline, and it counters the notion that it is inherently weak.
I love that. Who quoted that?
That, I did not have a source for that
code?
one. Yeah. I do have other ones, but
Share
that
the
was
other
the one
ones.
that talks about empathy is a respectful understanding of what others are experiencing. That was Marshall B. Rosenberg. This talks about the opposite. A lack of empathy leads to a lack of morality. And that to me speaks of world leadership, political leadership in today's age. If you see somebody who has a lack of empathy, then you better, that to me is a huge red flag. Mm-hmm. Another quote on a lack of empathy is, a lack of empathy is a defining characteristic of the sociopath. Yeah. And that was quoted by Dennis Prager. And then this one, there is no greater intelligence than kindness and empathy by Bryant McGill.
Ooh, I like that one because I do feel like because of that self-awareness aspect of empathy, there is a level of intelligence there.
Yes.
It's the kind of intelligence that you can't learn in books.
No.
It's the kind of intelligence that you can't learn necessarily from other people, but you have to learn it for yourself. It's a self-intelligence.
Correct.
And that's powerful.
I have an insight into the word empathy that I did not know before.
Okay.
And I wondered if I could share that because it kind of gives you a different perspective. So the word empathy is a Greek word. Its Greek root is empatheia. And they break it down to the beginning of the word em, which is translated into the word into.
Yeah.
So into, and pathos, feeling. Pathos means feeling. So it is a kind of travel. Empathy is considered a kind of travel. It suggests that you enter another person's emotions.
It's active.
It is active, once again.
It's
an action. Jinx.
I love that. I love the breakdown of that, though, because I feel like it further explains but simplifies.
Into feeling. I thought that was different.
I can't help it, but every time I hear like something is broken down into a Greek word, I think of I think of My Big Fat Greek Wedding. Have you seen that?
It's been a long time that I've seen
The dad in the movie.
It's okay. I make lamb.
The dad in the movie is constantly like, give me any word.
Windex.
Any word at all. He's like, and I will tell you how the meaning of that word is Greek.
I will prove to you is Greek. I love that
awesome.
movie. Oh my gosh, it's amazing. And he killed everything with Windex.
Yep.
You have a word
got their thing, man. You know? For my grandma, it was echinacea, so.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
You know, not that far off.
I had a couple. When we were talking about the world and the political aspect of it and the greater, Barack Obama, this is a quote from him.
Yeah.
And no matter, we don't have political affiliations with
we don't talk
spiritual
about
center.
that.
We don't talk about that because we don't align with one over the other, and we don't dispute that. We accept everybody's viewpoint, and we keep everybody's opinions.
We respect everyone.
We respect everyone. We accept everyone's religious beliefs. Why are you laughing at me?
I'm just
going to talk about
it. We do not accept bigotry.
Oh God, no,
we do not accept
anything that
rudeness.
uplifts another person. Anything that tears down, we're going to have a conversation about.
Yeah.
Because that's not what we're about.
We will talk about crazy things happening in the world.
Yes.
But we're just not going to put our political opinions on it.
We're not on
Like
here
from
to
a world.
Exactly. We're not on here to debate and create a conflict. We're all about conflict resolution. Yes, creating peace.
But anytime that you have a stance in anything, there's always going to be conflict present, unfortunately.
True.
And our stance is in love. It is in compassion. It is in unity, and anything that aligns with those
There it is.
respective situations.
There it
So.
is. Thank you for clearing it up for
No,
me.
you were
I'm sorry.
fine. No, I just wanted to be clear.
Yes.
So
So
we
he,
love everybody though.
Barack Obama, this is a quote for him. He said, "Empathy is a quality of character that can change the world."
Yeah.
I
Say that
genuinely
again.
believe that.
Empathy is a quality of character that can change the world.
And why do we think it can change the world?
So many different things go into that, but like for instance, something as simple as the McDonald's line. Like I can't tell you how many times I've been in line over the years, and sometimes I'm having a crappy day, not every time, but you get that person in front of you that like you get up to the window and they're like, "Hey, the person in front of you paid for your meal." Like it's just, and I know that's not necessarily showing empathy directly to somebody, but it's that love
It's an act of
of
kindness.
sharing. Exactly.
Yeah.
And like we were talking about, like the feeling of not feeling so alone. If both people are consciously and intellectually, emotionally aware,
Yeah.
you can build that connection. But then for some people, it's an eye-opening event. For some people, growth might happen quickly. It might be an instant aha moment. Or it might stem something that's slower moving, but any amount of growth towards love, unconditional love, and understanding yourself, understanding others. Just like we were talking about earlier, there's so many people that are listening to defend, listening to deflect, not listening to understand or be empathetic. And a lot of it is the way that we're raised and the lack of having that in our homes and around us. And the first time somebody shows you that, it's probably going to scare the life out of you because you're like, what is going on?
Or what do
This
they
is
want?
terrifying.
What do you
What's
want?
the agenda?
What's
Yes.
the agenda? What's the ulterior motive here?
Right.
was just-
There always has to be something underlying
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
our greater society.
What do you really want?
And unfortunately, the people, I don't even think that all of them necessarily do it intentionally or
No.
even realize what they're
No.
doing. But when you have been raised that way and you are constantly looking for the underlying motive, you're conditional too. If you always expect that everybody else has conditions to you, more than likely you are going to have conditions to everybody else, because to you, that is how the world works.
So this is something that needs to be a relearning of our society
Oh my gosh.
as a whole.
Yes.
And it's going to have to happen through people who are brave and courageous enough to be vulnerable.
Superpower!
Yes.
For freaking real. For freaking real though.
Right?
Because it takes so much courage to be empathic.
Yes.
It takes so much courage to be open to empathy.
Even more so than that, Jew, because I hear things like family experience.
Yeah.
Of us being and knowing that we were empathic but running away from it.
Right.
I think it's even more so, it's that next step of saying, okay, I know I'm empathic, but accepting it and stepping into it and putting on that mantle, if you will, and saying, I'm not going to run away from it in fear. I'm going to embrace it for what it is, because it's necessary. It's needed in this world. Why am I here on this planet? Why? I'm not here just to take up space. I am here to make a difference, right?
Right.
So what if it is just willingly taking on that mantle that I know I already have within me, because that's been given to me for a reason. It's a part of my being. It's a part of who I am. If I help one person, then I accomplished what I was meant to accomplish.
And my other thing, and I feel like I want to say this with a caveat here. I want to say that this is kind of an unpopular opinion, I feel like, in the spirituality community, but empathy is not subject to any one hierarchy of individual.
No.
Empathy, being empathic, is not a position of power spiritually. Empathy and being empathic is something that is innate. It is within each and every single human being, because this is how we connect with each other. this is how we create community, is through the vehicle of empathy, or empathy is one of those vehicles. So it is already ours. It's already a part of us. Now, some people are more open to it.
Right. And that's what I was saying.
But that doesn't mean that, other people can't experience it, can't be empathic. And I hear that an awful lot. Well, like, I'm an empath. We all are.
Right.
We all are
empathic. In truth, we all are, but not everyone will tap into it.
Right.
Not everyone will embrace that.
But they have the capability
but they
to do
can.
so.
They do have the opportunity, because it is part of their innate being. I wanted to read one last quote in the energy of affecting the world, and it's from Goldie Hawn.
All right, Goldie.
I know. I loved that. I know. I loved that. It was an unlikely. We need to have empathy. When we lose empathy, we lose our humanity.
And look at what we're seeing.
Yeah.
But I also want to counter that with, right now, I feel like in our society we have a very loud energy of the opposite of what empathy looks like.
Yes.
We have the energy of what a lack of humanity looks like. And that's kind of like more in our media and stuff like that. But if we pause and we look at different outlets, like at least my TikTok feed shows me a lot of the empathy side of things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is too.
And it shows humanity.
Yes.
So if we have our eyes open, even in the darkness of the world, we can still see the light. We can still see the empathy. We can still see the love, the compassion, the kindness.
We still have work to do.
Yeah.
We still have work to do. I mean, which brings up the need for things like this podcast, for example. I mean, somebody might hop on here and say, why are these three girls on here talking about empathy? This is why.
No.
This is why.
I'm sure.
Sorry, these three superhero women on this podcast sharing about empathy as a superpower, because it's needed.
Right.
Our work is not done. Beautiful, beautiful souls that have come and visited us and have gone on, like Thich Nhat Hanh and Buddha and Jesus and Mother Teresa and all of these beautiful, Gandhi, all these beautiful, beautiful people. And I know that I could not name them all, but why did they come? Why did they come? Because they had the same message, because they were trying to affect and create that ripple effect to remind us of who we truly are. When you look in the world and you look on the news, that's not who we are. We are all innately in these human bodies, but we are all spiritual beings. No matter what your belief is, whether you believe it's quantum physics or whether you believe it's another term, we all do agree that there is an energetic presence, and that is who we truly are. So those messengers, those messages that come to us all throughout history, they innately come back and say, hey, reminding us that the basis of all this is to remember who we are, and that we are here to learn how to love ourselves and learn how to love one another.
Any final thoughts, Emily?
Yeah. Just to go a little bit of a different direction too. One thing that just kind of popped in my head on the other side of things is, and I think this is potentially to where people that are so against or say that being empathetic is weak. We need to find a healthy balance too, because we do have so many people that there's people on one side that are very deflective, defensive, and need some mental and emotional, yes. But then you've got the other side of that too, where if you're an empathetic person, you're going to get hurt. It's going to happen.
You have to understand that that's part of it.
You're risking yourself.
Exactly. You are putting yourself out there. You are being vulnerable. You are sticking your neck out on the line to try to connect with someone and make them feel not so alone. Some people just genuinely might not care.
Mhm.
They might just be that kind of person.
Right.
Other people may not know how to handle or react to that. They're not used to it. It's terrifying. It feels like a setup.
Makes them uncomfortable.
Exactly. So, as somebody that's empathetic, you're going to get hurt at
Right.
some point. It's going to happen. Whether it's just a little bit of like, oh, that hurt my feelings, or something huge.
Right.
But I think on one hand, don't be afraid of setting barriers. Like you can be an empathetic person. That doesn't mean you have to be a pushover
No.
or ran over either.
No, healthy boundaries.
You can love people. You can do your best for people, whether it be in a literal or physical aspect, or whether it is just being there for support. You can do those things, but at the point that it starts becoming draining, at the point that it is taking away from your love of self, everybody needs to decide what is best for them to handle those situations, but there needs to be a healthy balance of it too, because I hear a lot of people that do say that they're empathetic,
Right.
but a lot of the time, not a lot of the time, but you hear it, people saying they're being empathetic, but they're really just throwing all the love that they have at somebody else, trying to
Right.
heal them or get them to see the bigger picture, and it is draining their soul. So you have to hold space for yourself and love for yourself, and it is okay to give love to others, but recognize sometimes you have to do it from afar.
I had that question last night. Somebody was asking me, well, you know, how do you, where's the boundary? Where's the balance of that line right there where you are still showing kindness to somebody, but you're also creating a safe boundary with somebody when they are just taking and taking and taking and taking from you. So what would you ladies say to that?
I would say that what are you defining kindness as? Because sometimes we think that kindness is placating somebody. It's making somebody feel good, even if it is to your detriment. And the truth of the matter is, it goes back to that self-awareness aspect of empathy. First and foremost, it starts with the self. So if you look at a situation and you say, in order for me to be empathic or loving towards this person, I must dismiss myself, in a sense of I must not be kind to myself, or I must not be loving to myself, then right there's
a problem
right there within itself.
Yeah.
You're already starting on more of a almost like a martyr standpoint than an empathic standpoint.
So it goes across the boundary of healthy now.
Right.
Now it's no longer a healthy relationship, right?
Right. So then it's you're giving to something that you know is not a reciprocal kind of energy. So even here, when we look at your empathy wheel, and it says that there's connection that happens there within empathy, within itself. And we know that unconditional love requires a specific, compassion and connection. It's something that returns to you.
Correct.
So if you know I'm in a situation where I'm being empathic and I'm being loving and I'm giving it all outward, but there's nothing coming back at me, you're in a toxic situation.
Nothing positive is coming back to you. Love and empathy is not coming back to you.
Right.
Is what you're saying. That same positive energy that you give out is not being returned.
And I'm going to say this too, in a bigger perspective, like I'll speak from the perspective of running an organization that's about love and unity and kindness, empathy, all of those things, right? There are times where we're walking on this journey and we don't always feel that bounce back from the community.
Correct.
But the moment that I start to doubt that bounce back from the community, somebody comes in and shows me or gives me that example of the reciprocal energy. So I know that it's still there.
Right.
It's sometimes a cycle. It's sometimes a process. It sometimes takes time to feel that reverberation.
Truth.
Yeah.
That to me is a little bit of a different situation too. than
It is.
the two scenarios that you laid out.
It is.
two different scenarios.
Yep.
Yeah.
But I would say if it's reciprocal, great. But if it's not, then and say it's a prolonged situation where you feel like I'm giving love, and nothing's coming back to me in return. You need
Nothing
to
healthy.
Yeah, you
Right.
need to start asking yourself, okay, am I doing this out of a sense of duty? Am I doing this out
Guilt.
of a sense of guilt? Right, shame, whatever the case may be. And that's a part of that self-awareness aspect. So
It sure is.
Sometimes it might even be unconditional love, but it can still be toxic back towards you.
Yes.
Like there's situations that I can think of where I have genuinely seen people struggling and even known that good bits of it were by their own cause. They're being detrimental to themselves. But I wanted to see them get on their feet, or I wanted to see their kids get,
Right.
I want to say dinner, but
You want
situations
the,
like
you
that.
want the best
Yes.
for them. Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
taking in people's animals, like when I knew it was a bad idea, that kind of stuff.
to your detriment.
Yes, exactly, to my detriment, but I wanted to see them thrive. People will only thrive as much as they want to.
That's
Truth.
it.
Truth.
That's it. And if you have that feeling before it even begins,
Right.
That's difficult.
That's
That is
that
difficult.
boundary that
I
has
was-
to come up.
Yep, I was
You
gonna say,
know?
I think that's where you gotta lay those boundaries and those barriers to protect yourself. Because you have to come first. If you drain yourself dry, you can't help anybody else. You can try,
Right.
but by the end of the day, it's gonna be you that is serving the consequences of that. And they may too, but if they didn't care about what you were trying to do for them in the first place.
Well, there's a quote from Buddha that you can't pour from an empty cup.
Exactly, exactly. It's like, situations like that. Now I think back of like, what could I have done, or what could I have done differently, in a sense, to still be empathetic, but that wouldn't have been detrimental to myself. And it's like, just as an example, instead of taking that pet in and being like, yes, come stay with me, I could have been like, that sucks. Let me help you find a place that you can house your animal, or let me help you find a shelter that you can go to while you're going through this, versus
give you a
taking
resource.
yes,
That to me right there, when you were saying that, I didn't mean to interrupt.
no,
you.
you're fine.
That to me, it screamed of me needing to be self-aware first.
Mm-hmm.
It was almost like I'm going to be part of the problem if I don't take a step back and say, okay, where is that boundary?
Right.
And why am I feeling the need to put the boundary here? Because I see that if I go beyond that I'm not only hurting myself, but I'm hurting them. And in the long run, because I continue to enable their poor behavior.
Yeah. Well, I'm not trying to catch it. It just reminded me
No,
of
I
something
didn't.
that somebody said in one of our spiritual support group meetings. I don't remember how long it's been. It's been in the last year or two. But she was talking about she had been in a marriage for 20, 30 some years or so. And she's like, I knew I should have left this far in. And it was pretty early on. And she was like, and then I stayed for all these years. And she was like, I didn't realize until after I left. Not only was he holding me back, but I was also enabling him because
Right.
I was being comfortable. I was making things easy, and it was detrimental to us both at the end of the day. It held me back and it held him back because we both just stayed in this complacent place. And it's like, that's just it. It's like we have to have boundaries for ourselves to protect ourselves, but at the same time, when you're doing things or helping people that just genuinely kind of soaking it up but not really interested in,
And maybe they're unaware of it too.
and that's just it. I think some people are just genuinely unaware, oblivious.
But as somebody who is wanting to be that empathic energy in the world, I guess my little note with all of this would be that you're going to have to go through the moments of people taking advantage of you.
Yeah, it is going to happen.
You're going to have to go through the moments of being vulnerable, like you said, getting hurt, because what that does is it teaches you discernment. It teaches you the people that, in the situations that call for your empathy and that will be the reciprocal situation, versus the people who will not. But I will also say this, those people that we give empathy toward and we give love toward, whatever, we give them those little nuggets and we learn our lesson, but they also have an opportunity for a lesson there too.
Yep, and that's just
powerful.
True.
I think in the other last little just kind of note tidbit with that too, something that I've really realized and I've had to fight with a lot the last 7-8 months too, is like I did all this healing. And big parts of these were still me and who I was, but a lot of it has like grown, flourished, whatever, the last couple years. I love it. But even when you get hurt, don't let it pull you backwards. Because a couple of times I've been like, and I'm so aware that I'm like, there's times I look back and I'm like, man, ignorance really is bliss. I don't ever want to go back there, but there's moments I want to go back there because I'm like, it was toxic, it was crazy, I don't really want that, but at the same time, I was so oblivious to all these other things that now I can't unsee.
I was just going to say, once you see it, you can't unsee it.
No, you can't.
But
you
isn't that
really
to your
can't.
benefit? Really?
It is. It genuinely is. And I love it. There's days it's a pain in my butt.
Yes.
But I love it.
I get it.
But there's been a couple of times, and like genuinely, if it wasn't for you guys and Ashley, there's a big chance that some of the stuff I've been through the last 5 or so years could have pulled me back into that place because
I get it.
Angry or wanting to be petty, wanting to be vengeful. And even in moments now where I'm like, oh, I'd love to do this or for that to happen. And then like 30 seconds later, I'm like, Emily, that's mean. Just stop. That's not okay. And that's not benefiting you. Go find something to do. And I will. I'll go read a book.
I'm going to take 10 seconds and go into my cursing closet and I'll be back in about 30 seconds.
It was funny. I was on the phone with Ashley the other day. And I literally, the whole time I'm on the phone with her, I'm like, girl, I'm being ridiculous today. I am so irritated for no reason. I don't know why. And then somebody cut me off. I don't remember what I said. And I said something. And I was like, literally out loud on the phone with her. I'm like, Emily, that's mean. Don't do that. And she just bust out laughing. She's like, I did the same thing all the time. But that's a part of being conscious and aware.
Self-aware.
You can have your little moment, but like, don't cling on to it. Don't let negative things pull you backwards. Don't let bad interactions or even the death of something, whether it be a relationship or a connection, whatever it is, a job, don't let it pull you backwards. Because it is so easy, especially those first couple times you get hurt, to be like, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. I'm done being nice. I'm done being loving. I'm done being understanding.
And we've seen those people and what they look like and what their life looks like.
Yes.
Oh
and
my gosh.
Believe you me, you don't want it.
No!
You don't want it. I am
so
so much happier being
Same
vulnerable.
Here.
Yes.
Teeny tiny
So much.
caveat with that, because I want people to know it's okay in that moment to pause and be angry. It's okay in that moment to pause and say, that hurt me. You know, don't ignore your feelings.
No.
Always acknowledge your feelings. Feel your feelings. Take a moment. Take 2. It's okay. But then something I keep hearing Louise Hay say is that you notice that it becomes a pattern of healing when you, maybe the first time something like that happens to you, you sit with it for like 20 minutes. Maybe the second time it's 18 minutes. Maybe the next time it's 15 minutes. You notice that you are able to bounce back a little bit sooner to where it becomes part of your innate nature to accept those things and move on. Right.
I think that so much that had to do with putting ourselves first. Like I want to be empathetic and unconditionally love people, and I can still do that.
Yes.
But I have to love me first. And no matter what the situation is, my feelings are valid.
Yes, they are.
My feelings and my wants and my needs have to be number one.
They do.
And like, even from a parental aspect, you know, especially in America, and I'm not saying your kids shouldn't be number one, because they are, but you know, it's very much shoved down our throat. Gotta be the best parent, gotta be the best parent, be a good parent, gotta do this and that and check all these and da-da.
Right.
you cannot be a good parent, you cannot be an involved parent if inside you are falling apart and trying to constantly pull it all back together.
Truth, because who is your child going to come to rely on?
Exactly.
Who does your child, from the moment that they come out of the womb, who do they rely on?
Not just rely on, but who do they emulate?
Right.
Every
That's
part
a
of
whole
their
other
life,
podcast.
that's a whole different podcast. But I heard while you were talking about that you, taking care of you are the foundation of every single relationship you have and ever will have. So taking care of that foundation is of utmost importance. It's not about being selfish or conceited,
Right.
or self-centered, all about yourself. It is about self-care and self-awareness. You take care of you take care of that strength of that foundation.
So I want to wrap everything up
Yes,
for
sorry.
us. No, you were totally fine.
Empathy is a superpower.
Yes, it is. And just to kind of wrap this up, I want to tell everybody who's listening something that I tell my kids every single day. Every time I drop them off at school, every time I put them on the bus, I say, be kind to yourself and others. So that's what I leave you with. Be kind to yourself and others. Be aware of yourself and how you respond to the world around you. And please, please, please find ways to be empathetic.